And hello once again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the JetFuel podcast, the podcast all about New York Jets football. I'm your host, Keith Harrington, and along with me once again, as always, the NFL draft kid, Kyle Stickles, and former NFL and Syracuse University tight end, Pat Davis. And always, when we come on the show to record, there's a lot to talk about. The Jets, one way or the other, never disappoint, and it's been a roller coaster ride the last couple of weeks. A big win over the Houston Texans, who came in red hot, and then a just debilitating loss on the road at Miami, only to come back and get another huge win over the Washington Commanders. So just a seesaw right now, a roller coaster ride for New York Jets fans. But, better to see progress than not to see progress. And even though they're a little inconsistent, we're still seeing progress from time to time, which is a good thing if you're a New York Jets fan. And Trevor Siemian got the start against the Commanders. The Jets had a big lead. And then Jacoby Brissett, we'll talk about him a little bit more later in the show. He came on and really turned things around for the Commanders, but the Jets still managed to come away with a hard-fought 30-28 win. They led the game 17-0 in the first quarter, 27-7 at the half, and then got outscored 21-3 to make it interesting in the second half, mainly due to the entrance of Jacoby Brissett into the game. But the Jets come away with the 30-28 win and now sit remarkably, really, when you think about what they've gone through, with a 6-9 record. So, some big news for Jets fans and for the New York Jets this week. It was announced this week that the Jets would retain head coach Robert Saleh and general manager Joe Douglas for next season. They will both be back with the Jets next year. And last week on the show, we talked about whether Robert Saleh was in trouble. And we were thinking maybe Joe Douglas would be too, but it was announced this weekend, actually, that both will be back. A little Christmas present for both of them. So, Kyle, what are your thoughts first? Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas set to return. What do you feel about this move?
I think it's good to bring him back for another year. I personally both like those two guys. I think they're both really good guys that have built a lot of great stuff around the organization, and I like their drive and like what they stand for too. But this upcoming year, no more excuses. Something's got to get done. Jets have to make the playoffs this next year, or else I see them not being back in the foreseeable future. But we'll have to see on that. But hopefully, it turns out okay.
Yeah, I think when you stop and think about it, Woody Johnson is doing the fair thing to do here, right? I mean, these guys came into the season expecting to have Aaron Rodgers. They expected to be a Super Bowl contender. And then they lost Aaron Rodgers 4 plays into the season. And somehow, through four quarterbacks, and we've criticized both Saleh and Douglas from time to time, they've still got a 6-9 record and might be able to finish close to 500. So, what do you think, Pat? Is this the right move for the Jets?
I think it's the right move, Keith. We had talked about, last week whether his job was in jeopardy or not. And I said that I thought that it was up to whether or not he was really the one who was calling the calls and making those calls about Zach Wilson to keep him as the starting quarterback, who was really pulling the strings. Maybe this tells us that it really was management that was still behind Zach Williams, or Zach Wilson, I should say, even as far as Saleh still keeping him in the game and things of that nature. I think he should get a fair shake because, like you said, it was supposed to be the Aaron Rodgers era, not the Zach Wilson era. And so now you start all over and you have Aaron Rodgers as your starter again. So, yeah, I think it's only fair that they give him another chance with the quarterback that he expected to be playing in the first place.
So we know that Robert Saleh is coming back as the head coach. We know that Joe Douglas is coming back as the general manager. So let's turn the page now to the much maligned offensive coordinator. It was impressive that the Jets got that 27-7 lead and then barely held on. But if you stop and think about it, most of the points Sunday were scored with a short field. They had a a big defensive play, an interception early. They had a blocked punt that set them up in good shape. They started drives inside the red zone because of Commanders' turnovers and mistakes. They had a big explosive play by Breece Hall for one score. But other than that, he really didn't move the ball much at all. They didn't move the ball in the second half whatsoever. So let's turn to Nathaniel Hackett, a good friend of Aaron Rodgers, a guy that he worked with in Green Bay. Do you think Nathaniel Hackett comes back, Kyle?
Oh yes, I do think he'll come back for next season too. I've said it before. I think that Rodgers is the one who's kind of keeping him in his place right now. I think well, he was obviously brought here to sit alongside Aaron Rodgers since he was like that in Green Bay. Um, so hopefully Rodgers ends up playing a full year next season and he can remain the coordinator. But play calling still can be better. The Commanders not a very good team, so he should have been scoring points either way there. But play calling's got to get better, and hopefully he's here.
And what do you say, Pat? I mean, Nathaniel Hackett, we've criticized him quite a bit this year. Not really tailoring his offense, I think was been the popular opinion, to Zach Wilson, as compared to what he would do with Aaron Rodgers. What do you think, Pat? Do you think Nathaniel Hackett will be back with the rest of the Jets staff?
I think he's had a pretty up and down season, Keith, like we said, but I think he retains his position as the offensive coordinator. I think we go back, like we just said, to the Aaron Rodgers era, and he gets another chance to start out with his quarterback that he, came to the Jets for in the first place. I think some of those other guys may get another chance too, even Lazard, and I'm not sure about Randall Cobb, but I've heard that Alan Lazard may get another chance to come back too, being that Aaron Rodgers wasn't there, and it gives them a whole summer to now go over what was good and what was bad, and to come up once again with an Aaron Rodgers playbook and just see how it goes.
And obviously, Devontae Adams is a guy that's going to get thrown around a lot. His name in the offseason. They need somebody opposite of Garrett Wilson to be a big playmaker. And he's obviously disgruntled with the Raiders, even with the Raiders winning impressively in Kansas City yesterday. He was not a big key factor in that game. So that's a name we're certainly going to hear a lot of for sure over the coming months. Breece Hall, let's talk about Breece Hall for a little bit. We've talked all season about, the Jets and Nathaniel Hackett. They've got to get Breece Hall more involved. And finally, we saw the Breece Hall we thought we were going to see the other day against the Commanders. Breece Hall, 20 carries, 95 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground. Passing wise, he caught 12 passes for 96 yards. This is what we expected to see out of Breece Hall this year. What did you think, Kyle? Is this the Breece Hall we have been waiting to see?
Yeah, definitely. He looked terrific on Sunday. They definitely got him involved in the game, which we haven't been seeing as of recently. Some of it's to blame on the O-line. The O-line hasn't been great this year, but a lot of play calls that were designed specifically to Breece on Sunday, and we need to see more of it yet again because I think he's main key to this offense.
Yeah, what do you think, Pat? We've been talking about getting Breece Hall involved all year. Maybe Nathaniel Hackett's been watching the show, and maybe he listened to us. I don't know. But finally, Breece Hall playing like we thought we'd see Breece Hall play. What do you think, Pat?
Yeah, I think Breece Hall is a good running back. I mean, just plain and simple. His flat-out speed is good. He catches the ball well out of the backfield. The long touchdown run is an example of how fast he can be once he's out in the open. And they got him the ball in the right areas this past game. The offensive line blocked a little better than they normally do, and so I think he showed what happens. When he gets a little blocking up front, what he can possibly do, and what he means to the scheme of the game.
Yeah, we always talk about much maligned players. Man, the offensive line of the Jets, we've certainly beat on them enough this year, but I think we actually found a line that struggled more than the Jets or the Giants the Washington Commanders offensive line, it was just absolutely atrocious in that game. As well, it's funny though. I say that, but it's funny how much better they got when Jacoby Brissett was behind the center. So, interesting fact there that that line couldn't block anybody all day long for the Commanders, and then all of a sudden, when Jacoby Brissett was in there, maybe they just don't like playing with Sam Howell. Maybe they were motivated under Jacoby Brissett. Speaking of Jacoby Brissett, when Aaron Rodgers first went down with an injury, we talked quite a bit here on the JetFuel podcast about the Jets trying to acquire a quarterback that could still get them to the playoffs. So we talked quite a bit about Jacoby Brissett. And now 2 weeks in a row, he's come in and played extremely well and kept the Commanders competitive. And 2 weeks in a row, brought them from behind. Kyle, if the Jets had been a little more aggressive and gotten Jacoby Brissett, how might this have changed their season?
To be honest, I think the Jets would be very close right now to get a playoff shot if he was here right now. I know earlier on in the season we talked about bringing in a guy like him to this Jets team to play the quarterback position, and we just saw yesterday how he came back nearly led the Commanders on a 20-point deficit back into the game, almost beating the Jets. And I think if we look at the Jets, how they're usually playing behind in a lot of games this year, I think that would have been crucial if he was in there.
Yeah, 2 weeks in a row now, he's brought the Commanders from big holes way behind. What do you think, Pat? If the Jets had gone out and picked up somebody like a Jacoby Brissett, or specifically Jacoby Brissett, how different could their season have been this year?
So Coach McPherson, when I was on Syracuse, he had this little saying that he would say, if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, it'd be Christmas every day. So I'm going to apply that to this question, and I'm going to say that Kobe Brissett probably would have been a good choice back then because he was a seasoned backup guy. He's been in the NFL for a while. But, who knows how he would have played in the Jets offense. He's a mobile guy, which, I like. I like to have a mobile quarterback. I'm from that era of Donnie McPherson and guys like that in college football. So I like a quarterback that can move. So Jacoby Brissett definitely might have been one of my choices as a pickup at that time and a need for a quarterback on the roster.
And right now with the Jets sitting at 6-9 and a lot of teams 7-8 and 8-7, they might have been right in the hunt with just a couple more wins. And if they hadn't experienced backup, like a Jacoby Brissett, they certainly would have been possibly even closer in that playoff race. We're going to take a break right now. The Jets looking to make it 2 in a row and 3 out of their last 4 on Thursday night when they take on the Cleveland Browns, a Browns team that is rolling right now. Right off the couch, Joe Flacco getting it done in Cleveland. We'll talk about this week's matchup against the Cleveland Browns when we come back. This is the Jet Fuel Podcast. Welcome back, everybody, to the Jet Fuel Podcast, the podcast all about New York Jets football. I'm your host, Keith Harrington, joined, of course, by Kyle Stickles and Pat Davis. The Jets coming off an impressive win, 30-28. They hang on against the Washington Commanders after building a 27-7 lead. Jacoby Brissett bringing the Commanders back, but they end up coming up short. And this week, the Jets will take their 9-6 record to Cleveland to take on the Cleveland Browns. And what a story the Cleveland Browns are. They have been through 4 quarterbacks this year, and somehow they are sitting right now at 10-5. They're suddenly looking like a contender in the AFC. And other than the Ravens, really, the AFC is kind of a mess right now. Seems to be a little bit up for grabs. And, of course, they lost Nick Chubb right off the bat early in the season. I know because he was on my fantasy team. So it was a severe blow to my fantasy team right off the bat. But somehow these guys are 10-5. And right now they're getting it going with former Jet Joe Flacco, who literally was on the couch, got the call, went to Cleveland, came out and played, and he is just playing fantastic. Well over 300 yards, 3 or 4 touchdown passes in this week's game. I mean, the Jets, I think if you sat there and said, oh, we get to play the Browns with Joe Flacco, they'd be licking their chops. But right now, they've got to be thinking this is going to be a tough game. What do you think of the keys for the Jets this week, Kyle, against the Cleveland Browns?
So the offensive line, they got to block like they did against the Commanders, obviously. Um, I think the most pressures like one alignment allowed was 2 the whole game, which was really good stat for them. Got to score points on offense. 30 would be nice, although I don't know about that. And then lastly, um, just keep Myles Garrett away from the quarterback.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see who that quarterback is for the Jets. Is it going to be Trevor Siemian again, or will Zach Wilson be out of concussion protocol, which he's still in at the time of the recording of this program, and we're just a couple of nights away from the game. So that's going to be a factor too, is who's quarterbacking the Jets. Again, this Cleveland defense, this should be a defensive struggle, right, Pat? I mean, two elite defenses going at it here.
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to be a defensive game. You got two good defenses going up against each other, and like you said, Myles Garrett, Kyle. I don't know who's going to keep him out of the backfield. I'd like to see which guy has that assignment. But Myles Garrett's probably one of the best defensive players in the league right now, and the Browns are coming along, like you said. Joe Flacco's off the couch, but Joe Flacco was around for a long time. We even talked about him possibly being a backup guy when Aaron Rodgers went down, but they never approached him. And so, good for the Cleveland Browns that they thought of him, and that the pickup for them is working out well. So I see it being a defensive fight. Like you said, I think it's going to depend on which quarterback plays. The offensive line definitely has to continue blocking. They definitely need to score touchdowns rather than field goals. And I think if they can keep the running game good, it'll open up the pass game a little bit more too.
Yeah, it's going to be a Thursday night game this week, so a quick turnaround for the Jets against Joe Flacco and the resurgent Cleveland Browns. It's been a team that every time they've been counted out has battled back this year. They definitely are a resilient squad, but the Jets have been somewhat resilient at times too. So should be a very good game, and as we said, probably a defensive battle. And can't wait till Thursday night to see how that one plays out. The Jets can win that one. They'll be it's 7-9, and hey, closing out 8-9 if they could would be pretty impressive considering they lost Aaron Rodgers 4 plays into the season. Coming up, it's been a while since we've done our top 5 rankings for the AFC and NFC, and I thought about actually putting all the names in a hat and drawing it out this week. To be honest with you, it seems like it is a never ending, always changing rankings here, as you never know from week to week. It's been one of the craziest seasons we have ever seen, and Kyle and Pat and myself will rank our top 5 AFC and NFC teams with a couple of weeks to go. After this break, this is the JetFuel Podcast. And welcome back, everyone, to this week's edition of the JetFuel Podcast. I'm Keith Harrington, along with Kyle Stickles and Pat Davis. And we are going back after a couple of weeks off of doing our top 5 rankings. It'll be interesting to see because there's been a lot of, I don't know how many changes there'll be in our rankings, but there certainly has been a lot of strange games, upsets. It's very unpredictable this season. And so we'll see how close Kyle and Pat and I come to our top 5 rankings. I'll go first. We'll start in the AFC. And I think if there's one thing we do know, it's that the Baltimore Ravens should be at the top of the AFC rankings. An impressive win last night over San Francisco. Lamar Jackson's playing outstanding. I mean, this is just a great football team right now. They are peaking. They always say you want to be playing your best football when it's playoff time, and I think they might be doing that right now. Baltimore, for now, of course, every time we say this, somebody gets beat, it seems like. But for now, Baltimore is the clear-cut number 1 in the AFC, and I guess you could say the NFL after beating San Francisco. Number 2, I've still got Miami in there. Miami coming off a win, and they beat the Jets a week ago. Win over Dallas here this weekend. They finally have beat a couple of quality teams. The Cowboys, I know, struggle on the road, but Miami seems to maybe be putting it together at the right time as well. And I like Miami in there, number 2 in the AFC. Number 3, I know that I'm jumping over a couple of teams record-wise here, but I'm going to go with Buffalo at number 3 based on the fact that they're just playing, once again, their best football of the year. They're going to be the team that no one wants to play when the playoffs come. They've got a running game now to go with Josh Allen, and that's just going to make them that much more dangerous. It seems like for years we've been saying if Buffalo ever gets a running game to go with Josh Allen, look out. Well, finally, they seem to have found something with their new offensive coordinator, Joe Brady. He seems to have things rolling with the running game. Number 4, I've got Cleveland. Every time I look at this team, I'm thinking, how are they doing it? They're doing it with defense. Myles Garrett and that defense. Joe Flacco is playing very, very well. He's got a lot of weapons around him. If they had Nick Chubb, I think they'd be a Super Bowl contender, to be quite honest with you. But the kid Ford has been doing a nice job in the backfield, but a lot of receivers that he can throw to. Njoku, the tight end. I mean, a lot of weapons there for Joe Flacco. And I got them at number 4. And then the Kansas City Chiefs, I've got sliding all the way down to number 5, but still in my top 5. But, hey, you cannot lose at home to the Raiders, the Las Vegas Raiders, on Christmas Day. You can't have an abysmal performance like they had against the Raiders in that game and expect to be considered a serious contender. They're 9-6. They're going to have to go on the road for the first time in the Patrick Mahomes era and the playoffs more than likely. And so that's my top 5 in the AFC. NFC, I've got San Francisco still at the top of the heap despite the loss. They lost to maybe the only team in the NFL that's better than them. I mean, quite frankly. They're still just full of weapons. And, of course, Purdy had probably the worst day he's had as a starting quarterback for the 49ers. But they've still got a lot of weapons, a good defense. They're still number 1 in the NFC. I got Philadelphia number 2. They looked iffy, I guess, at best against the Giants. At times they look better than they have the last few weeks during their losing streak. And at times you were saying these guys might get beat by the Giants. So, still very wishy-washy on Philadelphia, but good enough to be number 2 still. Detroit, congratulations to Detroit. It seems like forever they've been waiting to win a division championship. The Detroit Lions have clinched their division. They're sitting there at 11-4, and they're starting to make people believe they're a contender. They seem to be more consistent than some of the other teams in the NFC. Dallas, just when you think it's safe to come out of the woodwork and be a Dallas fan, they have a game like, they have a couple of games where, they beat Philadelphia, then they get smoked by Buffalo, lose to Miami. Definitely a tough schedule, but that seems to be status quo for the Dallas Cowboys the last few years. And then 5th, very tough. There's a log jam of teams, but I'm going to go with the team that is hot right now, and that is the LA Rams. They've got things rolling. Matthew Stafford's playing great. He's got Cooper Kupp. He's got Pua Nakua. I mean, he's just got some weapons. They got their running back now that was injured most of the year. Look out for the Rams. They're a team that's going to be dangerous heading into the playoffs. So that's my top 5 in the NFC. Kyle, what do you have?
Okay, so for AFC, for number 1, I have the Ravens, just like you said, coming off a big win last night against the 49ers. Number 2, I have the Dolphins, clinched their first division title in a few years. Looking good as always. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle back again. Number 3, I have the Browns. Joe Flacco has been playing phenomenal despite not playing in a year, basically. And as we saw the other day, Amari Cooper having a career-setting day. Number 4, I have the Bills. The Bills are finally, I think, starting to come together a little bit. They got the run game, as you said, and I do think they're going to be scary too once the playoffs start. Number 5, I have the Jaguars. Even though Trevor Lawrence has gotten banged up a lot, I still think that when he's healthy, they are a scary team to play. And this is like the first week, I think, where the Chiefs have kind of fallen off of my top 5. They looked really shaky and bad yesterday. Patrick Mahomes made dumb decisions, and yet again, bad receiver play.
You can throw. You got to shake it off now if we want to put Taylor Swift on that.
The NFC for number one, I got the Niners still, even though they lost yesterday. They've still beaten pretty much the top teams in the NFC, so I still think they're up there. Number two, the Lions moved up for me, clinching their first division title in like 30 years. They've looked the best they've had in recent memory. Number three, I have the Eagles. They've been looking a little shaky as of recently, but I still think they're a really good team. Number four, I have the Cowboys. They've lost 2 in a row now, right?
Right.
Still good, but yet falling apart. Number five, I have the Rams. They've been looking hot. Puka Nacua, Matthew Stafford. I think they're gonna be a sneaky team once the playoffs start.
Yeah, for sure. They're a team that seems to be getting it together at the right time, no doubt about it. It's funny. Before we get to Pat's picks here, speaking of the Taylor Swift thing, I saw a good one on Facebook the other day, so I had to share it. It was a picture of early in the game when the Eagles looked like they were going to blow the Giants away, and DeAndre Swift was off to a great start. And I shared the photo, and it said the only Swift that looks like he's going home happy from his NFL game today. All right, Pat, go ahead. Your top five.
Okay, so my top five are similar, but there's a couple wrinkles in there. So number one, we all have the Ravens. The Ravens are probably playing the best football right now in the NFL. It was a great game they played against the 49ers, and that somewhere down the road is probably going to be the decision between them being the first seed overall. And so, unfortunately, Brock Purdy had a pretty bad game, but it happened. So I've got the Ravens at number one. Number two, I have the Miami Dolphins. Um, they won a close game over the Cowboys 22-20. I thought that game could have gone either way. Some dumb penalties in the last drive. All the Cowboys had to do was stop them from scoring. They'd have won the game. So unfortunately, they couldn't play defense when defense needed to be played. I have the Jaguars as number three. That's my shock out of the two of you. And I'm going to stick with the Jaguars at number three. I'm going to put the Browns at number four. Like we said, they got a really good defense, and Joe Flacco is doing more than just managing the game. He's winning the game. So my number five pick is the Bills. I don't even have, as Kyle said, the Chiefs are out of my running right now. They really aren't playing well. They've got something going on within the team. You know, there's some disgruntled players, whether it be over the referees or umpires or over fellow players that just aren't playing well, like the game they lost when the guy lined up all sides. I mean, it's just really dumb things, but it's taking them out of the ball game. So NFC, 49ers are still number one for me. Eagles are number two. I think the Eagles, even though they almost gave up a win against the Giants, they still have to play the Giants again 2 weeks from now. And so we'll see what happens then. But they still came out with a victory, and that's been what they did in the earlier part of the season was always found a way to win or find a way to win. So they found a way to win that game, and they pulled it out. So they're still number two. The Cowboys I have as number three, and I have them at number three because even though the Lions have, clinched their division, and it's the first time in like 37 years or something like that they've won the division, I'm still going to go with the Cowboys on the head-to-head matchup this weekend. So we'll see. That'll be a chance for them to switch into the number three spot and knock the Cowboys out if they can beat the Cowboys head-to-head. The Lions are number four. They've been playing really good these last couple games, and I think you do have to a certain extent, give them the respect they deserve for winning their division. The Buccaneers, I think, are pretty much out of it, even though they may still be in first place in the division. But I went with the Rams and I went with the Seahawks. Geno Smith comes back and they play well and they win a big game. And so my number five is the Rams, the Seahawks, and then possibly the Buccaneers.
All right, sounds good. Sounds good. So a lot of us have the same teams at the top, and then on down the line, we have a little bit of a difference of opinions, and we're going to get to see it play out on the field here in the next couple of weeks. It's going to be exciting. I can't remember in recent memory, anyways, such a mess I'd hate to be the one that's keeping track of all the tiebreakers and everything for the teams that are getting in the playoffs. And it's still really anybody's Super Bowl right now. I mean, it appears Baltimore and San Francisco have the edge, but the way the season has gone, you never know. That's going to wrap it up for this week's edition of the Jet Fuel Podcast. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe to the Nivett Media YouTube page. And also don't forget to share the show so we can spread the word about the Jet Fuel Podcast. For Kyle Stickles and Pat Davis, I'm Keith Harrington saying thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time. This has been the Jet Fuel Podcast.